What you're about to hear seems like fiction, but it's a true story. A woman from the rural heartland rode on horseback to sell her last possession and ended up discovering a family secret buried for more than 30 years. A fire, a forgotten letter, and a revelation that changed everything. And what she found in that envelope will deeply move you. Subscribe to the channel and follow this journey where the most unexpected reunion reveals that true love can withstand even time itself. The sky was still dark when Sarah Richardson woke up. She didn't need an alarm clock. The weight of worries never let her sleep more than a few hours each night. Her eyes, red from crying, stared at the worn wooden ceiling of the small clay house in rural Oklahoma. She got up with effort, feeling her joints ache after another restless night on the old bed she had inherited from her mother. The drought had been punishing the Midwest for 8 months. The pond that supplied the property was reduced to a muddy puddle, and the few animals she still owned, 2 skinny goats and some chickens, barely had anything to eat. Her corn and bean crops, which previously guaranteed her sustenance and a small income at the town market, were now just dried up, yellowed stalks under the merciless sun. "It's going to work out," she murmured to herself as she washed her face in the already murky basin of water, carefully saved from the day before. She repeated these words like a mantra, even knowing she was one step away from complete ruin. She put on the only still presentable dress she owned, a faded blue cotton fabric from many washings, and tied a flowered scarf on her head, trying to hide the deep circles under her eyes. At 32, Sarah seemed to carry the weight of a much longer life on her bent shoulders and calloused hands. She went out to the yard and walked to the small wooden stable, where Thunder, her bay horse, waited patiently. He was a medium-sized animal but strongly built, with a characteristic mark on his neck, a horseshoe with a small cross in the center, branded when he was still a colt. The animal was the last valuable reminder of better times, when her mother, Mrs. Eleanor, was still alive and the small property was thriving. "The day has come, old boy." Sarah stroked the animal's neck, feeling her throat tighten. "You're the last thing I have left to save this piece of land." She put a worn but well-maintained saddle on the animal and tied a small bundle with a change of clothes and the little food she had managed to gather for the journey. The town of Willow Creek was almost a full day's walk away, but it was there that she would have a chance to sell the horse for a fair price. Before leaving, she looked one last time at the small house. The cracked clay walls from the heat, the roof with some missing tiles, the fence fallen at various points. Everything seemed about to succumb to abandonment, just like her hopes. But something inside her refused to give up on that piece of land that represented everything she knew in life. "I'll be back," she promised in a low voice, "with enough money to save what's left." The path to Willow Creek was a dirt road that wound through the parched countryside. The prickly vegetation seemed to suffer as much as Sarah, with twisted branches pointing to the sky in a gesture that mixed supplication and resistance. The dust raised by Thunder's hooves stuck to her sweaty skin, forming a layer of dirt that mixed with the silent tears that occasionally ran down her face. When she finally caught sight of the first signs of the town, the sun was already beginning to set. Willow Creek had grown since her last visit 3 years ago. New buildings rose among the old colonial houses, and the movement of people and automobiles was much greater than she remembered. She pulled the scarf to better cover her face, suddenly feeling ashamed of her appearance amid the urban bustle. Her first destination was the animal market, where livestock and horse fairs traditionally took place. But upon arrival, she found the place almost deserted. Only a few merchants were dismantling their stalls with discouraged expressions. "What happened to the fair?" she asked an elderly man who was collecting a tarp. "It's over, miss. Central Agriculture runs everything now. They bought everything, control all the animal trade in the region." The man pointed to a large warehouse across the street, with a luminous sign that read, "Midwest Agricultural Central." "And where can I sell my horse?" "If you're lucky, right there, but they pay a pittance, only what they want. Small folks like us don't stand a chance anymore." With a heavy heart, Sarah crossed the street and entered the imposing establishment. The interior was air-conditioned, a luxury she barely remembered. and several uniformed employees circulated between counters and computers. She immediately felt out of place with her simple dress and dusty feet. A young attendant looked her up and down before asking with evident disdain, "May I help you?" "I want to sell my horse," Sarah replied, keeping her voice firm despite the intimidation. The young man gave a short laugh. "Ma'am, you need to schedule an evaluation, and we need documents of the animal's origin. Documents. He was born on my farm, raised there his whole life. Without documentation, we can only offer the minimum price. And we have an evaluation queue for the next 15 days. 15 days? Sarah didn't even have money for a decent meal, let alone to stay in town for that long. She left the establishment feeling the weight of defeat doubling on her back. She walked aimlessly through the increasingly dark streets, pulling Thunder by the reins. Her stomach growled, protesting against the forced fast since morning. That's when she spotted the central market, still illuminated despite the late hour. There were people buying fruits, vegetables, meats, and other products. Sarah stopped. In front of the entrance, gathering courage. She wasn't a beggar, had never been. But hunger and desperation pushed her into a situation she never imagined living. She approached a fruit stand and, after taking a deep breath, extended Thunder's reins to the merchant. "Sir, I have this horse. He's a strong, healthy animal. I would need to trade him for food and a place to spend the night." The man looked at her with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. "Ma'am, I don't—" "How much for the horse?" The masculine voice, deep and educated, came from behind her. Sarah turned and found a tall man, approximately 50 years old, wearing expensive but discreet clothes. He had well-groomed grey hair and deep dark eyes that examined her with interest. "He's not for sale to central buyers," she responded defensively, thinking he might be an intermediary for the company that dominated the market. "I don't work for them," the man smiled slightly. "I'm Robert Mitchell. I have a property on the outskirts of town and I'm interested in good horses." As he spoke, Robert approached Thunder and began examining him with evident knowledge. His fingers ran through the animal's coat, checked his teeth, his hooves. That's when he noticed the mark on the neck, the horseshoe with the cross in the center. For a moment, the man seemed to freeze. His eyes widened and a subtle tremor ran through his body. He touched the mark almost reverently, as if he were in the presence of something sacred. "Where do you come from?" he abruptly asked Sarah, his voice slightly altered. "From the countryside," she replied, reticent. She didn't trust strangers, especially wealthy-looking men in the big city. Robert seemed to want to say something more, but he contained himself. His expression was a difficult mix to decipher. Shock, contained emotion, perhaps even fear. "I'll buy your horse," he said finally. "I'll pay a fair price, more than you would get anywhere else in town." Without waiting for a response, he took a leather wallet from his pocket and counted several bills, offering them to Sarah. It was much more than she expected to receive, more than she would need to save her property from immediate bankruptcy. Sarah hesitated. There was something strange about this man, in the way he had reacted to seeing the mark on the horse, but the reality of her situation didn't give her room to refuse. "Thank you," she murmured, accepting the money with trembling hands. "Where will you spend the night?" asked Robert, in a tone that seemed casual but hid a latent urgency. "I'll look for a boarding house," Sarah replied, carefully storing the money in the pocket of her dress. "I can recommend a safe and affordable place," offered Robert, pointing to a side street. "Mrs. Martha's boarding house, 2 blocks in that direction. Tell her you're coming from me." Sarah thanked him with a nod and walked away, feeling Robert's eyes fixed on her back. She didn't notice when, minutes later, he handed Thunder to an employee and began to follow her discreetly down the dark street. Mrs. Martha's boarding house was an old 2-story building, painted in faded yellow, with wooden windows that creaked at the slightest breeze. Sarah was received by a robust lady with grey hair tied in a bun, who examined her with experienced eyes, before showing her a simple but clean room on the 2nd floor. "Mr. Mitchell sent you?" asked Mrs. Martha, while arranging the bed with freshly laundered sheets. "Yes, he recommended this place," replied Sarah, putting her small bundle on a chair. "Do you know him well?" "Everyone in Willow Creek knows Robert Mitchell," replied the woman with a slight smile. "He left here more than 30 years ago. Came back rich from Europe about 2 months ago. Bought the old Thornton farm and is renovating everything. A reserved man, gentle with everyone, but doesn't open up to anyone." Mrs. Martha's words sparked Sarah's curiosity, but she was too exhausted to continue the conversation. After a quick bath and a simple meal served in the small dining room of the boarding house, she retired to her room, where she fell into a deep sleep, the first in many, weeks without the weight of immediate concerns. The next morning she was awakened by soft knocks on the door. Mrs. Martha entered carrying a tray with coffee, bread, butter, and fruits. "Mr. Mitchell was here very early," informed the proprietor, placing the tray on the small table. "He asked me to let you know that he would like to talk to you. He said he will come pick you up at 10 o'clock, if that's agreeable to you." Sarah frowned, suspicious. Why would that rich man continue to be interested in her after already buying her horse? However, something in the way he had looked at Thunder's mark aroused her curiosity. That mark had been made by her mother, who said it was a family symbol, although she never explained its complete meaning. "All right," she finally agreed. "I'll be ready." At 10 o'clock sharp, Robert arrived driving an elegant car. He wore casual clothes but of evident quality, and brought with him a tense expression that he tried to disguise with polite smiles. "Good morning, Ms. Richardson," he greeted her formally. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. I would like to show you where Thunder will be housed and, if possible, talk a little." Reluctant, but driven by a curiosity she couldn't explain, Sarah accepted the invitation. During the journey, Robert asked seemingly casual questions about her life, the small property, how long she had lived there. Sarah responded with short phrases, revealing as little as possible, still suspicious of the man's intentions. They arrived at a large property on the outskirts of town. The farmhouse was under renovation, with scaffolding around the colonial-style main house. Employees worked on restoring the gardens and facilities. Robert led her to the newly constructed stables, where Thunder was comfortably resting. "Your horse will receive the best treatment here," guaranteed Robert, observing the animal with a gaze that mixed admiration and something deeper, almost nostalgic. "That mark on the neck, who made it?" "My mother," replied Sarah, stroking Thunder's neck. "She said it was a family symbol but never really explained it. Why are you so interested?" Robert hesitated, as if carefully measuring his words. "It's an unusual symbol," he finally answered. "It reminds me of something from a long time ago." "You're not from here, are you? Mrs. Martha said you recently returned from Europe." "Yes. I lived abroad for almost 30 years. His eyes acquired a distant shine. "I left the United States very young, under complicated circumstances." After visiting the facilities, Robert invited her for lunch on the veranda of the main house, from where one could see the entire property, and in the distance, the first houses of Willow Creek. The food was simple but well prepared, and Sarah noticed that despite the evident wealth, Robert maintained modest, typically Midwestern habits. During lunch, the conversation flowed more easily. Robert told about his life in Europe, where he had built a company importing American fruits. Sarah, in turn, spoke about the harsh reality of rural life, the difficulties with the drought, the recent loss of her mother. "She raised me alone," she revealed while playing with the leftover food on the plate. "I never knew my father. Mom avoided talking about him, as if it were a forbidden subject. All I know is that he left when I was very young." Robert's hands trembled slightly while holding the water glass. His eyes, fixed on Sarah's face, seemed to be looking for something, with almost painful intensity. "And your mother, what was her name?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Eleanor Richardson." The glass slipped from Robert's hands, spilling water on the table. He apologized, visibly disturbed, while a maid rushed to clean up. Sarah noticed his sudden agitation and felt uncomfortable. "I think I should go now," she said, getting up. "Thank you for lunch and for taking good care of Thunder." "Wait," asked Robert, regaining his composure. "I have a proposal for you. I'm looking for someone to supervise the horse breeding here on the farm. Someone who understands the animals, who has experience. The salary would be good, would include housing and— "I don't need charity, Mr. Mitchell," interrupted Sarah proudly. "The money I received for Thunder is already enough to solve my most urgent problems." "It's not charity," insisted Robert. "It's a legitimate job offer. I've seen how you care. For Thunder, how you talk about him. People like that are rare these days." Sarah refused, thanking him once more. On the way back to the boarding house, she tried to understand why she felt so uneasy in the presence of that man. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't identify, but that resonated somewhere deep in her memory. That night, lying in the boarding house bed, she couldn't sleep. Robert's questions, his reaction to hearing her mother's name, everything seemed connected in some mysterious way. She then remembered a small box that her mother kept with care and that Sarah had brought with her when she left the farm, one of the few personal belongings she couldn't part with. She got up and removed the carved wooden box from the bundle. Inside there were some items that her mother considered precious: an old and yellowed photo, a child's bracelet with the same horseshoe and cross mark that Thunder carried on his neck, and a small envelope never opened with her name written in Mrs. Eleanor's careful handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope for the first time. Inside was a brief letter. "My dear daughter, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer by your side. There are truths I didn't have the courage to tell in life, but that cannot remain hidden forever. Your father did not abandon us of his own will. Robert was forced to leave the country, falsely accused by his own brothers. He didn't even know I was pregnant when he left. The horseshoe mark with the cross was created by him for our first horse, a symbol of our love. Forgive my silence, daughter. Fear and pride prevented me from seeking the truth for so many years." Sarah let the letter fall on the bed, feeling as if the world had collapsed on her shoulders. Robert Mitchell, the rich man who had bought her horse, who had invited her to work on his farm, was her father, a father who had never known of her existence, who had been driven away even before her birth. She took the old photo and examined it carefully. It showed a young couple, her mother much younger and smiling, next to a man who was undoubtedly Robert 30 years ago. They had the same eyes, the same face shape. How had she not noticed the resemblance before? While trying to assimilate the revelation, a deafening noise broke the silence of the night. Screams came from downstairs, followed by the acrid smell of smoke. The boarding house was on fire. Sarah quickly put the letter and photo in the pocket of her dress, but before she could get the rest of her belongings, smoke invaded the room, dense and suffocating. She ran to the door, only to find the corridor already engulfed by fire that was rapidly climbing up the old wooden stairs. Coughing and with burning eyes, she retreated to the window. The second floor was too high to jump without risk of serious injury. The smoke was becoming increasingly thicker, making breathing difficult. She felt panic growing as the flames licked the door of her room, approaching inexorably. That's when she heard someone calling her name from outside. She leaned out the window and saw among the people gathering to observe the fire the figure of Robert Mitchell, looking up with an expression of absolute terror. "Sarah!" he shouted, desperate. "Hold on! I'm coming to get you!" The flames were already consuming the curtains when Robert managed to find a ladder and prop it against the wall, quickly climbing up to the window. With a gesture, he encouraged her to climb onto the windowsill. "Trust me," he asked, extending his arms. "I won't let you fall." At that moment, with the fire at her back and the man she had just discovered to be her father in front of her, Sarah had to make a choice. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the window and jumped into Robert's extended arms. Robert's strong arms supported Sarah as they descended the improvised ladder. Around them, people ran in all directions, some trying to form a chain to pass. Buckets of water, others just watching the tragic spectacle of flames consuming the old boarding house. Firefighters arrived in an aging truck, but it was already too late to save the structure. Robert led Sarah to his car, parked a few meters away. She coughed incessantly, her face stained with soot and her eyes red due to the smoke. She trembled, not just from the fright, but from the revelation she had just discovered minutes before the fire. "You're safe now," murmured Robert, covering her with his own coat. "I'll take you to my house. You need medical attention." Sarah had no strength to protest. She let herself be led, feeling strangely protected next to the man who, according to her mother's letter, was her father. On the way to the farm, they remained in silence, she lost in tumultuous thoughts, he casting her worried looks while driving quickly down the dark road. At the farm, a local doctor was called in a hurry. After examining her and ensuring there were no serious injuries, only mild smoke inhalation, the doctor recommended rest and plenty of hydration. Robert provided a comfortable room for Sarah with a view of the gardens that were beginning to be restored. The next morning, Sarah woke, feeling physically better but emotionally confused. She put on borrowed clothes, simple but of fine fabric, and decided it was time to confront Robert with the truth. She found him on the wide veranda, watching the sunrise while having coffee. Upon seeing her, he immediately stood up, his face showing relief. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling out a chair for her. "Better, thank you," replied Sarah, sitting down. She took a deep breath, gathering courage, and then placed the photo and letter she had saved from the fire on the table. "I believe we have a lot to talk about, Mr. Mitchell. Or should I call you father?" Robert paled at seeing the objects. With trembling hands, he picked up the photograph, running his fingers over the image as if he could, through that gesture, recover the lost time. "So you know," he murmured, his voice choked. "How did you find out?" "My mother left this letter. I found it last night, shortly before the fire." Sarah maintained a serious expression, trying to control the storm of emotions that threatened to overflow. "Why didn't you tell me as soon as you saw the mark on Thunder, or when you knew my name or my mother's name?" Robert lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I was afraid," he admitted after a long silence. "Afraid of being wrong, of creating false hopes, of being rejected. I needed to be sure." He paused, as if organizing his thoughts. "When I saw the mark on the horse, I felt as if time had gone back. That horseshoe with a cross. I created it for the first horse I bought for Eleanor. It was our personal symbol, but it could have been a coincidence. And when you heard her name, it was like taking a punch to the stomach. I tried to contain myself not to scare you. After I left you at the boarding house, I sought out Mrs. Jenkins, an old friend of your mother's. She confirmed what I already suspected, but didn't mention a daughter." His eyes filled with contained tears. "I didn't know, Sarah. I swear by your mother's memory that I didn't know she was pregnant when I was forced to flee." Sarah wanted to maintain her anger, to feed the resentment for the years of absence, but there was an undeniable sincerity in Robert's words and expression that was beginning to break down her defenses. "Why did you flee?" she asked, her voice softer. Robert stood up and walked to the balustrade of the veranda, looking at the horizon as if he could see the past drawn against the clear sky. "My family had the largest farm in the region at the time. My 2 older brothers and I worked with my father. But I was different from them. I had progressive ideas, wanted to modernize production, treat workers better. This created tension." He paused, taking a sip of now cold coffee. "When I fell in love with Eleanor, the daughter of one of the farm's cooks, the conflict exploded. My brothers didn't accept our love. One day I discovered they were embezzling money, selling cattle without recording the transactions. I confronted them, threatened to tell our father." His eyes darkened with the painful memory. "The next night, the police invaded my room. I was accused of theft, of embezzling the money that my own brothers had stolen. They planted evidence against me. My father, already elderly and manipulated by them, believed the lie. I had to flee in a hurry. A friend helped me leave the country with fake documents. I spent years living as a fugitive until I could prove my innocence, but by then it was too late. I learned that my father had passed away, that the farm had been sold. I thought Eleanor had moved on with her life, perhaps married someone else." Sarah listened attentively, the pieces of the puzzle of her life finally fitting together. "She never married," she revealed in a low voice. "She raised me alone, working 3 different jobs to maintain the small farm she managed to buy with her savings. She passed away 6 months ago after fighting a prolonged illness. Robert closed his eyes as if absorbing a physical pain. And I never knew. I could never help her, never get to know my daughter. His hands closed tightly on the balustrade. If only I had searched more, investigated better. She could have looked for you too, pondered Sarah, surprising herself with the sudden understanding. Fear and pride kept you both apart. A heavy silence fell between them, filled only by the distant singing of birds and the occasional sound of workers continuing the renovation in the back of the house. Finally, Robert sat down, again facing Sarah's gaze with a new determination. I know I can't recover the lost years. Nothing I do will change the past. But I would like to have the chance to get to know you, to be part of your life from now on, if you'll allow it. Sarah felt tears welling up, but didn't contain them this time. I spent my whole life imagining what my father would be like, creating a figure based on the few evasive comments from my mother. At times I hated you for abandoning us. At others I created heroic stories to justify your absence. She extended her hand, hesitantly touching the old photo. The truth is more complex than anything I had imagined. It always is, agreed Robert, risking a shy smile. I don't know if I can call you father just like that suddenly, admitted Sarah. I need time to assimilate all this, but I'm willing to try. The following days passed in a strange dance of approach and retreat. Robert showed Sarah the property he was restoring, told stories of his life abroad, listened attentively when she talked about her childhood and youth. They were two strangers trying to build a bridge over a 30-year abyss. A week after the fire, Robert suggested a visit to Sarah's small farm. I would like to see where you grew up, where Eleanor lived all these years, he explained with genuine respect that touched Sarah. The return journey was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. When they finally arrived at Sarah's property, Robert observed with moist eyes the simple house, the parched land, the few skinny animals that still resisted. She fought bravely, he commented, his voice full of admiration. She raised you, maintained this place all alone. She was an extraordinary woman, agreed Sarah, feeling a new pride for her mother. As they walked around the property, they met old Joe, the elderly caretaker who looked after the few animals in Sarah's absence. The old man's eyes widened upon seeing Robert. Good Lord, he muttered, making the sign of the cross. It's like seeing a ghost. You look just like the young man in the photograph. What photograph, old Joe? Asked Sarah, curious. The one Mrs. Eleanor kept under her mattress. Sometimes when she thought no one was watching, she would look at it and cry softly. The old caretaker invited them into his humble house at the back of the property. From a rusty tin box, he took out a yellowed envelope. Your mother gave me this before she passed, he said, handing the envelope to Sarah. She asked me to keep it in case he ever returned. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to Robert, written in Mrs. Eleanor's careful handwriting. I think this is for you, she said, extending the letter to Robert. He received it with reverence as one who holds something infinitely precious. As he read, tears flowed freely down his face without any attempt to hide them. She forgave me, he finally whispered, carefully folding the letter. Asked me to take care of you if I ever returned, as if she knew we would meet. Mom always said some things are written in the stars, commented Sarah, feeling a strange peace enveloping her. They spent the rest of the day at the farm. Robert observed everything with attention, asking questions about planting techniques, problems with the drought, the most urgent needs. In the late afternoon, as they were returning to the car, he made a proposal. I have an idea for this land. The region suffers from drought, but there are modern irrigation techniques, more resistant crops. We could transform this place, make it productive again. I don't have money for that, replied Sarah pragmatically. I do, affirmed Robert, simply. And technical knowledge, but it's your land, your decision. It would be a partnership, not charity. Sarah considered the proposal. A week before, she would have refused immediately, out of pride. But now, seeing the sincerity in Robert's eyes, she understood that it was more than an offer of financial help. It was a way to build a relationship, to recover part of the lost time. "We can try," she finally agreed. In the following months, the small farm underwent a transformation. Rainwater harvesting systems were installed, new planting techniques were implemented. A small agricultural processing facility began to process local products, generating employment for families in the region. Thunder, the horse that had unwittingly reunited father and daughter, was brought back to the farm where he was used for breeding, producing strong colts that maintained the same characteristic mark, the horseshoe with the cross in the center. The relationship between Robert and Sarah evolved slowly, like a delicate plant that needs time to create roots. There were difficult moments, when the weight of absence made itself felt, when unanswered questions arose. But there were also discoveries of surprising similarities, of shared tastes, of identical ways of reacting to certain situations. Year after the reunion, the farm had flourished, becoming a model of sustainable agriculture in the rural heartland. On a hot Sunday afternoon, Robert and Sarah sat in the shade of a newly planted mango tree. In the distance, Thunder grazed peacefully, his silhouette outlined against the evening sky. "I think she would be proud," commented Sarah, observing the now green and productive land. "Mom always dreamed of seeing this place like this." "She is seeing," replied Robert with quiet certainty. "From somewhere, she is watching all of this." Sarah smiled, feeling a peace she had never imagined possible. The path had been long and difficult, marked by painful losses, but also by reunions that destiny had saved for the right moment. "Dad," she called, using the word she had avoided for so long. "Thank you for not giving up on finding me." Robert's eyes shone with emotion upon hearing the word Dad for the first time from his daughter's lips. He extended his hand, held hers, and together they watched the sun set on the horizon of the heartland, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, a silent promise that the end of day does not always bring only darkness. Sometimes it announces the beginning of a new journey. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah and Robert's story has touched your hearts. To follow more exciting journeys like this, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives that explore family ties and the reunions that destiny holds for us. Find it by clicking on the left. If this story awakened emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on this video. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the unexpected paths of the heart. Share in the comments if you have experienced or know stories of reunions that changed lives. We're eager to read your accounts.